What's going on, everyone? Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Ducks Dish podcast. I'm your host, Max Torres with ScoopDuck on 3, coming to you on Tuesday, April the 8th, 2025. Coming to you, as always, from Long Beach, California. And joining me on today's episode of the pod, which is live on YouTube and X, is ScoopDuck owner and publisher Justin Hopkins. J-Hop, how are you? Haven't seen you in a minute.
Yeah, it's been just kind of weird not being able to connect, and just I think it's kind of been hard because we're all hoping for some good news, especially the Oregon fans, and feels like a dry spell of commitments. But and then on top of it's kind of weird because spring ball's closed. Like none of the media can go, and not that you were getting a lot anyways, but you're getting even less now. And my bet is that's probably something that happens in the fall again as well. So we'll just have to see.
Yeah, it's a weird time because I think there's been instances where stuff's closed, like maybe once a week or something, but this is just full on. Nobody's coming in, no walk-in pictures before practice and anything like that. So it is as closed as I think it's ever been since I've been covering Oregon. So that's just a new thing to adjust to, but at the same time, it doesn't really affect me or you because we're not out there in Eugene, so we're getting basically all the same stuff that the rest of the reporters are.
Yeah. I mean, people know you, and neither you or I are in Eugene and at the practices daily, but doing our thing the way we've always done it and still covering it. And so like you said, it's not really any loss to us. We're still doing our same content and rocking and rolling. But it's still interesting, and quite frankly, I think it's just the way things are going to be under Dan Lanning. I mean, there's no reason for me to believe it's going to go back the other direction and everybody's going to get more media access. And I do believe we are seeing more and more schools limit their access kind of across the nation. So I don't know if maybe that's really like a byproduct of the transfer portal. It seems like, I think it's a coach's decision, of course, but you can't totally regulate and monitor who comes in spring practices. You kind of can, but you kind of can't. So you kind of wonder, like, okay, are they worried about, maybe guys getting evaluated and reported back through the back channels about transfer portal and stuff? I don't know. It's just an interesting time.
It's an interesting time for sure. But you know what it's a great time for? It's to try us out at ScoopDuck. You can get 1 week of access for $1. You're not going to find any better recruiting coverage in the Oregon market. I can definitely vouch for that. And then we're getting excited for football season to be here as well. It's April now, but it'll be August before you know it. So great time to come and check us out. Great message board community. We got a newsletter that we're sending out pretty much daily, and it's a fun time over there. So come and check us out if you haven't already. And if you guys are watching us here on the ScoopDuck YouTube channel, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for us. It greatly helps us do what we do and continue bringing you guys the best recruiting and football content that we can. So the plan for today's show, I was talking to Justin before we went live. We're going to do a little bit of mailbag. We got some questions from our ScoopDuck subscribers that we are going to prioritize first. So even more of a reason for you to head over to ScoopDuck. And then we're also going to see if we get any questions here in the live chat and try to address some of those. And we got a lot that we can get into. We can talk recruiting. We can talk some of the latest pressers. We heard from Dan Lanning, Ross Douglas, Gary Bryant Jr., and Austin Novosad today. So we will kick things off with a recruiting-focused question, Justin. This one comes from Snakeosaurus on ScoopDuck, who has one of my favorite profile pictures, and I think it was like the first coaching headshot that Lanning took. But the question is, what is your reaction to the news about Jared Curtis, 5-star quarterback, not going to G-Day anymore? I'm assuming he's referencing Rusty's update, Justin, that was posted on the boards earlier today.
Yeah, I'm going to assume that that's what he was referencing as well. And, just from reading that update from Rusty, who's, plugged in on the Georgia side, it was not committal on the fact that he wouldn't go. Rusty believes that Curtis probably will not take visits, but it wasn't, etched in stone, guaranteed he wasn't coming, sort of a deal. So I think we should probably preface that before we get into it. Now, again, it's the same thing as we've said all along. If Curtis visits one school and not the other, obviously that's going to probably bode well for the school that he does visit. So if he doesn't visit Georgia and he does visit Oregon later on down the line, you probably are going to feel pretty good if you're an Oregon fan, and vice versa. If he shows up at Georgia this weekend for their G Day and doesn't get out to Eugene in a couple of weeks, it's obviously not good for Oregon. So I guess we'll see. I mean, it's a little bit of speculation, but as I posted on the site, the good news is we'll know definitively, at least if he's taking visits or not, in a couple of days, because G Day is this Saturday. And so, if he does end up on Georgia's campus, which is something that I don't believe they'll be able to keep a secret, not on a spring game weekend, it'll give us our indication that Curtis is taking visits or not, because it's kind of been back and forth. I know it was a report, I think, from Spiegelman on Rivals that kind of said he would take visits, but it hasn't really been like mass reported at this point, whether it's on 3 or 24/7. So it's just kind of up in the air. And frankly, nobody really knows for sure what he's doing.
Yeah, so we'll see if he ends up popping up anywhere. I mean, we've talked about it a bunch of times, Justin, but we all know the trip to Athens from Nashville is much shorter than the cross-country trek to Eugene to see Dan Lanning and the Ducks. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add to the answer here. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's set in stone. He hasn't done any interviews for a long time now. I remember I reached out to somebody in his camp and was more or less told that he's not going to be doing interviews, and he kind of wants to keep things quiet until he makes his decision. And that was before he had chosen to delay his commitment. Not that he had a commitment date, but we kind of thought it was coming at any moment, and now it's going to be, of course, on May 5th. So we're officially under the 1 month mark, but we don't necessarily have a whole lot more clarity here. As it stands now on April 8th, we haven't seen Oregon really get involved with any other 2026 quarterbacks, for whatever that's worth. I think that's been something I've been keeping my eye on throughout the month. And I'm just excited to see how this one ends, because I know for you and me, Justin, it would make our job a lot more exciting if the Ducks had a 5-star quarterback in the fold to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it would help with others. It would be a huge commitment because, I'll shoot it straight. I know you will too. I mean, it's been a dry spell. It's been a long stretch of, I guess, basically you could call it bad news at this point, because they've suffered more decommitments than commitments in the last couple months. And, that's just, again, I hate to beat on a dead horse, but that's just where we're at. That's the way Oregon does things. That's the way Lanning does things. Nothing's changed. And that, to me, that's like kind of a sign, like, okay, look, this is what Oregon's done every spring. They're active and they're recruiting very, elite guys, high-end guys. And, it feels like Oregon does a good job kind of saving their best offer, if you will, for last or towards the end, and kind of make their move. And it's been successful in the past, and it probably will be again. But it really tests your patience to get to that point, and that's pretty much where we are right now.
Rolling right along here with another question from one of our ScoopDuck subscribers. This one comes from NYC Duck, who asks, what position group do you think is the highest priority for the staff in this recruiting cycle? I think there's two that come to mind for me. I mean, it's easy to say quarterback. It always is. But I would probably lean towards offensive line or linebacker as priority positions for the Ducks this cycle. Linebacker is a fairly easy case to make. They only signed one prep linebacker last year in Gavin Nix, the IMG Academy linebacker. A little bit of drama in that recruitment at the final hour, Justin, flipping from Miami. I know a lot of Oregon fans were probably happy to score a recruiting win at Mario Cristobal's expense out there in Coral Gables, but that was a massive win. I think that there were a lot of good linebackers that they were involved with, but from an optics standpoint, flipping an in-state guy away from Miami at a school that always has elite dudes in IMG Academy, I think sends a pretty strong message. And then offensive line, we know that that's just a premium position, especially the tackles, and they're in on a whole lot of good guys. Cody Green is already in the fold. They're battling to hang on there. Emmanuel Ahianacho and Jackson Cantwell as well. So I think that's kind of where I go when I first hear this question. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I won't get into the offensive line simply because you said it, but my answer would be offensive or defensive line. It would be both of them. I think we can see pretty early on that Oregon has prioritized defensive line as well, with the number of commits that they have and had, and the number of guys that they're continuing to target. So, obviously the Tom flip is something that, they will continue to work on. And I would expect that we see Tom on campus at some point. But I think that, those are the two position groups that are clearly prioritized. With offensive line, it doesn't maybe necessarily feel like this will be a large class in terms of the numbers, but it is looking like it's going to be a potentially elite class. Cause like you said, they're chasing 5 stars early on here. And Cody Green is, a guy they've got committed, and they're looking at pairing, Cantwell or Ihinicho with him, both 5 stars, and some other really good players. So, to me, it's offensive and defensive line if I was answering that.
Okay. Yeah. No, we love the discussion. And I think that the D line group is going to be interesting to follow because they have suffered some decommitments like you talked about. I think that at one point they probably had the best defensive line haul in the country. But what has happened since then? Tomohini Tapoy flipped to USC, and Bot Mulitalo decided he wants to play offensive line. So I don't really think you can hold too much against the staff. If anything, I think you're maybe knocking them, if that's even the right word to say, for Tom flipping. But I think that we know that USC made a huge push there, and then I just think it was a weird situation with Bot choosing to play offensive line. So there's not a whole lot that they could have done there. But I like what you had to say there, Justin. We got a comment here. J-Hop's beard game going strong from our guy Jesse Keller.
Yeah, I was kind of looking at that when we started this thing, and I didn't realize it's quite as bushy as it is. And then we're entering summer, so I don't know if I need to trim this thing down or what, but the gray hair makes me look, what do I want to say, seasoned. And then when I shave it all off, I tend to look a little bit younger. But yeah, I appreciate you noticing. It's getting pretty furry for sure.
Yeah, I feel like you don't usually grow it out like super, super long. I like to keep mine on the fuller side. For a while, I like to go really close and like thin, but I've been rocking with the fuller look lately.
Yeah, going for it. Yeah, I don't know. My wife likes it. She's always telling me to grow my beard or grow a mustache or whatever. And sometimes I just let it go, and then other times I'm like, okay, I'm done with this, and I shave it off and I start all over again. So
yeah, I haven't gotten a shave since I got it shaved right before the proposal. So maybe I'm due now to chop it up again in a little bit. Nothing too crazy. But I just thought that was a funny comment from Jesse. So wanted to throw it up there. We got one more from the ScoopDuck board, and then we'll kind of open things up a little bit. So if you guys have any questions or comments, throw them in the live chat, and Justin and I will do our absolute best to get to them. This one's a bit of a long one, so I'm going to read it slow so we can both kind of digest this. This one comes from Illinois Duck 309 on ScoopDuck, who asks, regarding Oregon's last few years of top-level football recruiting, is the focus now more on retaining players with NIL this year rather than allocating NIL to bring in high-end transfers to fill roster holes? 100% aware that the transfer portal will be open again before the start of the season. Curious as to how that plays out with 3 top 10 recruiting classes in a row. And then they just go on to list the number of transfers that the Ducks have taken in the last couple of cycles. So I guess it's more a question of allocating NIL for high school recruiting or keeping guys that are already in town on the roster.
Yeah, both are important, right? And I don't think, this doesn't get talked about enough, but I don't think anybody's done a better job than Oregon of keeping their talent on the roster, right? I mean, we've seen very few guys transfer out of the program, and even fewer guys transfer out of the program that, would be starters or would be key contributors. So I think in terms of what Oregon has done on the NIL front to keep guys in Eugene, Oregon's at or near the top of the list there. And, that's, it's a great question and maybe a great point, something that's not talked about enough. I mean, the pool of money is only so big, right? It's not like it just expands and expands. I mean, it does a little bit, depending on the year, but, it's not like, hey, we've got 20 million allocated here to keeping guys on the roster. We need another 20 million to go sign the next guy, a group of guys. It's just not feasible. I just don't think that's feasible. So I don't think Oregon's doing anything different. I think the roster is probably in a very close position to where Dan Lanning's happy. And what I mean by that is Most position groups are deep. Most position groups are talented. Yes, it's probably lacking experience this year and just, having guys that have been starters. But now if you take those guys and you season them up this year with the talent that they have behind them and bring in another class, you're looking at Oregon having one of the deepest rosters in the country, I think, moving forward for the next, 2 to 4 year window. And that's where we're at. So, does one pool rob from the other pool? Maybe a little bit. And so I think what we're going to see, maybe here's a really good comparison right now for me to end on, is you'll look at Oregon this year, and my guess is they'll sign somewhere between 20 to 25 guys through prep recruiting, and probably just a handful of transfer guys. I don't think it'll be a very heavy transfer portal class next year. They'll still get a couple of guys because there'll be really good players that enter the portal, but they won't be reliant on it. Conversely, you take that, USC is going to sign probably 30 plus guys in this recruiting cycle and probably hit the transfer portal for another 10 to 12 guys on top of that because of the way their roster's set up. So, all things being equal, whether there's an 85 or 105 scholarship limit or no limit at all, everybody's going to have about the same number of guys. And at the end of the day, everybody's got to kind of work within their budget, their total budget.
Yeah, for my take on this, I think it's just if you're seeing the Ducks take fewer transfers each year, which is basically the trend that we've been seeing under Lanning, I think you are going to be able to kind of free up more funds or more resources to allocate towards player retention or high school recruiting, whatever it might be. I always feel like it's kind of taboo to talk about NIL, but hopefully we're getting away from that. The more that we get used to it and just the new stuff that happens legislatively. Is that a word? I think so. So that was a good question. But I think that we're basically coming at it from the same angle there as far as how Oregon reacts to it and is going to continue moving here. We got a question here from Andrew. Andrew is a frequent viewer and listener, so thanks for tuning in, Andrew, and we appreciate the question. Andrew says, really would love to know if there's any indication of how the DB depth chart is looking. It's hard to believe Offord could be a starting nickel over Pleasant, but I've seen it in a few different places. This is a great question because the DB room is loaded, but inexperienced. I think that since you have Dylan Thieneman, the Purdue transfer in there, he's kind of the guy that is your glue guy, your culture guy, as the coaches have more or less said. I know that Chris Hampton said that his work ethic is unlike any player he's ever coached. But until we see these guys line up and take real live reps, Justin, I just don't really see a whole lot of separation. I think that Kingston Lopa is a guy at safety I feel very confident we're going to see plenty of this year. Same with Theron Johnson. I would assume we're going to see a decent amount of Jaden Kennedy, the Ole Miss transfer, but with the timing of his addition and some of the injuries that he's had, I don't know if he's necessarily going to be a starter versus maybe more of a depth piece. But I'm glad that you mentioned Offord with your question, Andrew, because there was a picture that's going around with him today that it looked like he had picked off Dante Moore, and then he had said something like, "Stop sleeping on me." So practices are closed, but we get little things every now and then here and there to kind of inspire some discussion. I'm going to try to find that while you talk.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this, open practices or not, they've basically gone through a week of practice. I know there was a couple practices in March, but we'll just kind of call it that they've had a week of practices and one, scrimmage. And so for us to go and do too much of a takeaway from that body of work would be pretty reactionary. So if myself or Max or anybody else makes a claim, we're really just making a projection at this point. If Dan Lanning came out and said, "Hey, Offord's going to be our starting nickel," we'd be shocked. And even then he might still be projecting himself. So that's just where we're at. I do think if I'm making a projection on this season, which is a long ways out, I think Offord is going to be a guy that sees snaps this year. I don't know that I would qualify him as a starter, but I think you're going to see Dan Lanning use more bodies this year, not just at defensive back and not just at nickel, but in all across this roster this year. I think this is going to be the most, what am I going for here? The heaviest group of two deep guys that I think Oregon will have, because in the past we've expected some of these younger guys to get run and maybe they haven't. Like a perfect example is Blake Purchase, right? Just didn't see a lot of Blake Purchase last year. And probably for no real reason other than there's only so many snaps to go around, and it's hard to take, Tatum Tuioti off the field, and it's hard to take Jordan Birch off the field, and it's hard to take, Mateo Uyungale off the field. So you had really good players there, and I just think that a guy like Offord, and you mentioned Kennedy, and we didn't even mention Dalen Austin, and where does Peyton Woodyard fit into the role there at safety, and Kingston Lopa. I mean, there's a lot of good players vying for that spot. So I think Offord will get run. I mean, it's pretty hard to sign a guy like that at Offord's level, at his ability level, and probably not see him get on the field in some capacity. But I mean, I think Dalen Austin's probably the odds-on favorite to win that star nickel job, assuming all legal matters are taken care of and not an issue. Of course, that's a big assumption, but again, a projection. Who knows? Offord's going to play, I guess, to answer that. But and Pleasant's doing track right now, so who knows? He's participating in both, but is doing track as well. So I think the fall is going to be really big for him.
Sure, it definitely is. Let's see. We got one from Keon Johnson who says, "Is there any chance we land Jett Washington?" Jett Washington, of course, is the 2026 four-star safety out of Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas. A guy, Justin, who has kept his cards pretty close to the vest in his recruitment. Doesn't do a whole lot of interviews. I interviewed him when they came out here to play Modern Day, and he wasn't like a soft-spoken guy, but just somebody who we don't necessarily get a lot of updates on. But what we do know is that this is someone that the coaches went out to see in Las Vegas twice during the January contact period. You can't see a guy more than 2 times. I'm pretty confident in saying that. So they went to see him at Gorman, and they also went to one of his basketball games. I feel like this is the Tez Johnson, Bo Nix adopted brother line. Did you know that Jett Washington is the nephew of the late Kobe Bryant? Because he is. So he's a tremendous basketball player as well. I still think Oregon has a pretty good shot here. I don't think there's a whole lot of separation. I think he's supposed to get back this month for spring practice, and then he'll probably take an official visit. But they've got all the big schools after him that the Ducks are competing with: Ohio State, Alabama, you name it, Michigan as well. So I think with Oregon's success on the West Coast in the Western region, I think Jett Washington is someone that Oregon is certainly a player for. And the other thing I'll just mention here, Justin, it seems like things have cooled a bit between Oregon and Celesi Moa, the coveted athlete and safety out of Utah. Maybe I could be wrong. We'll see if he ends up on campus soon, but I don't think he set his official visit yet with Oregon, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, in terms of Jett Washington, I'll echo what you said. I think Jett Washington and Brandon Arrington are two of the guys that have done a really good job in their recruitments, kind of not giving a lot away. Like, I think we know the main schools that they're both looking at, and there are some similar schools, right? They're USC and Oregon and Alabama, and maybe you toss in a Texas A&M there for Brandon Arrington. And, those seem to be the two schools mentioned for both, but I don't think there's really any clear indication of who leads for either one. And furthermore, I think that's also a byproduct of, I don't think either of those guys are looking to make an early decision. I think those guys are really just kind of prepared to take their time, take their official visits. And neither has given a firm indication that they're going to make a summer decision, that they're going to make a July or August decision. Probability wise, it would suggest that they likely will. But these are two guys that really don't seem to be in any sort of a hurry in their recruitment. So to answer your question, absolute chance Oregon can get Jett Washington. I don't know that they lead, but I would say that they're probably in the top 3 at worst for him, and the same with Brandon Arrington. But again, I think those are two guys that are really just kind of taking things slow, letting their process play out. I think these official visits that they end up taking in May and June will be very, very important.
We have a couple more questions that we can get to here in the live chat, Justin. But before we do that, I mean, I think that'll probably carry us the rest of the way. Is there just anything on your mind? Is there anything that you just been burning to get off your chest as it relates to Oregon football since we last had one of these?
No, I don't think so. I mean, it's just urging some patience. I know that fans are different, right? There's fans that are very energetic or enthusiastic and kind of live on the now, the news of today and tomorrow and yesterday, and really get amped up over it. But again, I think there are some of those fans that are a little bit in the bit of a panic mode because Oregon's lost a couple of recruits and hasn't had a new commit in a while. But I think there's some seasoned guys like myself and you and others out there that have, remember the day when Oregon signing a high 4-star or 1 5-star was an absolute peach of a class. And here we are looking at Oregon competing for multiple 5-stars, and probably the top half of their class is going to all be top 100 players. Just let the process play out and trust that Dane Lanning and Marshall Malco, who've done this for a few seasons at Oregon now and with high level success, will get the job done. So if anybody knows, this is like buying a car, right? You don't walk into the dealership and make your best offer right away, right? You're gonna drive the car, you're gonna walk into the office, listen to their offer, you're gonna walk out, let their manager come after you and try to talk you back and tell you to buy the car. And I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave unless you got a better offer. That's what we're doing here. So just let these guys get to the table. And I'm pretty sure this thing is going to come together pretty well.
Yeah, I remember when I think the first class where I like really started following Oregon closely was the class of 2017. And I think that Diameter Lenore was the highest rated guy that they got in that class. And he was one of the rare recommitments. He was committed to Oregon, backed off, and then he was down to, I believe, Oregon, Nebraska, and Mississippi State of all schools. Super bizarre top 3, ended up back at Oregon. And, he's having a hell of a career in the NFL on my Niners. So I love to see that. But just to echo your point, I think there's a difference between being a sunshine pumper and just saying, let the process play out, because Oregon knows what they're doing. And I'm more confident than not that the Ducks are going to have another great recruiting class. It's just, how are they going to get there? What twists and turns are we going to see? And that's why you and I do what we do and cover this team as best as we possibly can over at ScoopDuck. 2 more questions for us today, Justin. Let's go back to our guy Andrew real quick because he had another one for us. He says, also, I know the Ducks are really working hard to keep Cody Green, and land either a Iheanacho or Cantwell, but any word on interior offensive line? Is Tommy Tofi still a priority? Are they in the Sam Utu race? Anyone else? I'll pitch this one to you, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, it's clear that the priority is at tackle in the cycle, and I mean offensive tackle. I mean, with the names that are just listed right there in that question, Green and Iheanacho and Cantwell, those are 3 elite guys, and we know Oregon's looking at Kelvin Obot as well, who's I believe a top 100 player overall, and another very highly ranked offensive tackle. That's a priority. Haven't heard Oregon mentioned for Sam Utu. Tommy Tofi is still very much a priority and possibility, but I will say this: it does look like Oregon is not going intense after interior guys, and I think if you take a real hard, long look at this roster, the way it's constructed right now, they've got some pretty good interior guys on there now, and not very many elite tackles are on the roster. So I think that's why you see very few interior guys, and maybe why Oregon's not really making a push for Sam Utu. Seems to be a USC lean there at the moment. But if they can get Tommy Tofi and just put him with some of those other tackles, I mean, that's going to be a really good looking offensive line class, and probably one Dan Lanning's going to be happy about.
All right, last question comes from Brandon J., who asks, similar question to the DBs, but for the wide receiver room. Obviously, Stu will be the dude, but behind him, what are your guesses? Dak Moore, DeCorey Moore seems to be assumed as a day 1 starter. Is that realistic? Well, I'm glad that we got a question about the wide receivers, because today was the first day we heard from Oregon wide receiver coach Ross Douglas. Had a little story on that one written on ScoopDuck earlier today, so you guys can go give that one a read for free. I think, yeah, it's like, obviously Evan Stewart's the main kind of nucleus, I think, of the wide receiver position. DeCorey Moore is the most highly anticipated guy on the offensive side of the ball, I think, even transfers included. Unless you maybe throw Mekhi Hughes in there. I know a lot of people are excited about him coming over from Tulane, the talented running back. But you have him, and then you also have Justice Lowe, Malik Benson, who comes over from Florida State. Jurion Dickey is someone that we've heard about for a long time. Will this be the year he breaks through? Kyler Casper as well. Jeremiah McClellan, Dylan Gresham. I mean, I'm kind of listing the room at this point, so apologies for that. But it seems like it's a pretty open deal as far as who comes in and takes over for the departures of Tez Johnson and Trayshawn Holden. But that's one of the reasons I'm so excited for the spring game, is just to see who shows up and makes plays.
Yeah. Another group that's similar to DBs in the fact that there's a lot of young, unproven talent there. So again, right now, Dan Lanning is not trying to make those determinations. What he's trying to do is figure out what these guys are good at and what they're bad at, and trying to fix the bad to make them a more complete player. That way in the fall, when August rolls around and the first week's going, they can really start evaluating these guys more in terms of who's going to be the starter and not the starter. So for me, if I'm making a projection, I think you pretty safely put Eastu out there. I think you very safely probably put DeGory and Moore out there as well as a first guy. And you're probably looking at, some combination of Lowe and or Casper. McClellan's another tough one. Is this the year of Gary Bryant Jr., who, Dan Lanning talked about today and said, this is the healthiest I've seen him since I've been here at Oregon. Maybe this is the year for him. So you've got guys and talent there. It's just going to be a matter of who's the most consistent and who, the staff is going to trust the most to put out there and not make mistakes and make plays. So pretty good problem to have if we're really kind of nitpicking on who the third guy might be. Feeling pretty good about the first two.
There you go. Well, it's been a great stream, a great episode of the pod here. StreamYard's telling me we got 856 people here in the live stream. So we'd love to see you guys, the Duck fans, showing up in droves to support us and watch us here. So make sure you guys are following. Make sure you guys are locked in. You can follow Justin at jhopkinsSD. Find me anywhere at mtorres sports. Subscribe to the ScoopDuck on 3 YouTube channel. Come and see us at scoopduck.com. Try us out for just $1. And we'll see you guys in the next episode of the Ducks Dish Podcast.